All right, folks, so I promised you another video. Miguel here again. I want to show you that same technique and how we would go about doing that in the world of spreadsheets. So let's do it. Let's flip over to the spreadsheet. We're going to try to keep the same image, do an apples to apples comparison here. Remember, what we're hoping to do is, number one, do away with perspective distortion or any kind of distortion in our image. But the way we get a really good visual is by starting off with the actual image and of the camera at this approximately 30-degree tilt that I'm showing you right here. So back to that again, but this time I want to make sure I can show you that measurement across the top and then that measurement across the bottom, so we can quantify essentially, at least in the pixel world, how far off are we due to this distortion. So let's go ahead and grab some simple tools to help us do that. Let's go with the edge tool. Let's go with the fine segment tool. I'm going to drop it in here. And I'm going to put that across the top. I'm going to basically put the region right across here. And we're going to keep this as simple as possible. I'm just going to go there. I'm going to say, give me the widest, widest as in width, and then white segment. And then I'm also going to give it a little bit of an angle range just in case I don't happen to hit those edges. Maybe I'll give it the maximum angle range. I don't want to miss the edges or have those edges be considered less strong or weaker if they're not exactly perpendicular to that region. So I'm going to bump that up just a little bit. You know what? This looks pretty good to me. I'm going to click OK. That'll get me a measurement across the top. Perfect. Let's do some quick copy and paste, and we're going to change that particular little shortcut here with the F3 key. I'm going to change that new copied and pasted one. Should be identical in terms of its settings, but of course, since we're measuring down at the bottom, we get a significantly smaller measurement, right? So we've seen this before if you watch my Easy Builder version of this video. Nothing really fancy or crazy about this. We expect this because if you look closely, I'm looking at this part at approximately 30 degrees off normal here instead of looking straight down. And visually, this is what I want you to consider showing your customer, your audience member, if you want to drive home this point. There is clear distortion here, and there's no way for us to say we can kind of see it, see if you can make it out. It's there and it's in front of your face, and there's no way around it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to say, all right, well, how do we work around this? Well, you kind of saw this in action already, but I want to show you that it takes just a little bit of extra tool use, let's say, on the spreadsheet side of things. So to get this calibrated, here's what we need to do. We're going to need to use our friend, the Calibrate Grid tool. I'm just going to go ahead and type this in because I know you guys know that you can do this autocomplete help here. Calibrate Grid, perfect. Press enter. We'll be setting up a checkerboard calibration with a fiducial with 5mm spacing. Same thing I did last time in Easy Builder. So none of that changes. Here we'll go to pose, and then we will go to a live image. So here we go, live video, perfect. All right, so now that we have live video, it's looking pretty good, but what I really need in order to satisfy the needs of my grid is I need to show it, guess what, a grid. So there it is, there's my grid again. And I'm gonna go ahead and stop live mode so we can find another set of feature points. Let's see how many we come up with here. It looks like after just a few extra seconds, 297, outstanding. I like it. Let's go ahead and click calibrate. And you see that, you know what? The last time I did this video, I was at 0.9 and change. I'm at 0.8, so I improved it just a little bit. If I may, how did I do that? Same grid, by the way. I did not reprint anything. I tried to hold it just a little bit flatter so that I wouldn't be subjected to the imperfections of a piece of paper, essentially is what I attempted to do. It looks like I improved it just a little bit, right? Remember, if you want to improve the performance here, your goal is to get this to as close to 0 as possible. And the way you do that in this particular step is to show it a truly perfectly formed and perfectly spaced out grid, right? And you can get those usually in aluminum, something solid, rigid that doesn't change over time and is perfectly flat. All right, let's move on. Let's just hit OK here because we're done with calibration. And we've got a calibration. And the way I describe this little cell to folks is I tell them, look guys, just because you put a Calibrate Grid tool in your spreadsheet doesn't mean your stuff automatically changes. Let me get you a closer look into that. That didn't change any of your measurements. They're still in pixels, all right? So what that means is that just because you add this tool doesn't mean everything automatically changes. You know what? A lot of times, folks, they like to see that change, and I like to show it to them. So the quickest way, the way that I've seen pretty much everybody execute this in class when they're teaching customers or really anybody that wants to learn this is this way. they go ahead and find themselves a calibrate image tool. They say calibrate image, right? And then what they try to do is they say, oh, you know what, let's go ahead and let's take that relationship and apply it to an image. So I'm going to go ahead and click, I have image set to A0, that's fine. Let's go ahead and double click on calib here and tie it into this calibration grid we've got going for us there. And that will create a brand new image. And you know, oftentimes even myself, I'll get excited about this. I go, perfect, all I got to do now, let's go live. Let's put in the playing card again. And what we'll do now is we'll say, you know what, all I got to do now is I just have to take these guys and I have to tie them to this image. And that way these guys will appear as millimeters. And you know what, you're right. If you take these tools that originally, let me show you, that originally used A0 as their image, well, they spit out some pixels for you. If you take these guys and you then make them point to this image, you see right here, no more pixels. In fact, I'm gonna go ahead and leave those there for you. I'm not gonna cheat you out of looking at pixels. I'm just gonna copy and paste this entire thing all over again, right there, right? Because I want you to be able to keep pixels on the screen and also millimeters. Let's get rid of these arrows and let's go ahead and change these new copied and pasted edge tools. And let's go ahead and change them to image, not A0, but this calibrate image you see here. Bingo, Charlie 11, perfect. Let's click OK, and you'll see immediately, haha, 62.6 millimeters across that top. Let's go check out what's going on across the bottom. I like image, and I change this to calibrate image here, and I click OK, and you'll see that I now have 62.8. You guys see that? There you go. Very similar functionality to what you guys saw if you watched my Easy Builder version of this video, but basically now we're showing you that even though this is dramatically different in the pixels, in the pixel measurement, they are not dramatically. In fact, they're super close to one another because we've taken that distortion out. Now, I think that any reasonable person should have some questions about this right now. That might include you, that probably includes your audience member, your customer that is looking at this and going, hey, that's not bad, but shouldn't they be the same? If it's truly a perfectly cut card and you want to make that measurement, shouldn't your vision system be measuring these exactly the same? And my answer to that is yes, absolutely. I completely agree with that position, with that statement, with that assertion that if truly we have an accurate vision system, we should be able to get the same measurement across the top and across the bottom, especially if we're claiming that we can take the distortion out, right? Well, the answer to this question, and really the question is, why aren't they the same, right? That's really the question that's probably popping into people's heads at this point. Why aren't they the same? There are two reasons why I like to point out that these are not going to be exactly the same. Okay? And by the way, if somebody asks you that, you should not shy away from that kind of question. You should have a way to explain it. And if you have the tools in front of you or with you, you should have a way to bring those even closer and closer and closer, right? So if you can identify the cause to the problem, and then you have the tools to attack that cause, then you're gonna be able to shrink that difference down, right? So two things that I would point to, by the way, if you're curious, what I would be pointing to right now. Number one, two things have to come into play here or have to be working properly for us to say that these are exactly the same. Number one, that card truly must be cut exactly the same. You have to be able to, in the physical world, have a way to measure the distances across the top and the bottom and the other dimensions of that card to verify that it is in fact cut exactly the same, not just within tolerance, right? But exactly a very exact measurement across the top and across the bottom. That's item number one. If you expect the vision system to show you that it is a perfectly cut card, then you need to be looking at a perfectly cut card. Number two, you guys remember when we did calibration? Let's go back in there. When we did calibration, I showed you that my results were marginal, and that is a reflection on the grid that we used, right? The only way to get us even closer to be able to say that we can get the most accurate results without any buts or without any ifs or any qualifications, let's say, is you have to show it a perfectly formed grid. That entire calibration rests on how perfect that grid shows the camera what a true 5mm by 5mm distance is, okay? Across the entire field of view, ideally, Okay, so if you can perfect that grid and you can show the camera a perfectly cut part, you'll see that the difference between these two will get smaller and smaller and smaller. And the more you control your environment, they'll basically shrink to nothing if you can control that environment. All right. So I hope that helps. There is one more thing that I wanted to be able to show you guys, and that is the fact that you can show your audience how we can actually take that calibration and bring that image back to flat, right? So I showed you that when I acquired this image, I was acquiring it at approximately 30 degrees. I'm kind of ballparking that, but from my point of view right here, looking at my camera, I'm looking at it about 30 degrees, right? How can I take that distortion that I've already accounted for in this calibration, in this calibrate image, right? I've already accounted for it, and I'm showing you that I can measure that right here by removing that distortion. Well, the way I can do that is by a similarly named tool in the spreadsheet world. We call it the transform image. So I'm going to drop that in here for you. TRANSFOR, transform image. There she goes right there. Transform image. I am going to press enter, have that pop in and say, hey, show me the original image and show me the calibration that you have used, grid-based by the way, calibration that you have used in order to establish the relationship between the pixel world and the real world. Guess what? I happen to have one very handy right here. I'm going to make a reference from this property to this property right there. And when I do that, the rest of the stuff you don't even have to touch. You're basically saying I'm going to use the entire field of view, just like I did in my Easy Builder example, and I'm going to scale the image a one-to-one relationship from the original image to the new image. No scaling or no region center, nothing. I'm just going to scale the center of the image and scale the entire image one factor or 1x, let's say, right? So I'm going to click OK. And when I do that, again, give it a couple of seconds because it's going to take all that great math it did for the calibration, bingo, and apply it to the image that you're using. So now, not only do you have the original image, here's the before, here's the after, you have the newly transformed image. You have an undistorted version of that image that you can now show your customer, your audience, or you can even propose that your audience, your customer, your person in charge of developing the user interface for this application, show the user perhaps the undistorted image, right? Wouldn't it be great if we were inspecting this and you wanted a great visual to show somebody about how perfectly formed your cards are being made? If you could show them those cards in a perfectly formed fashion, I think that would go a long way and would make a much stronger impression and have a much deeper impact if you can show somebody the before and after view of that image. All right, gang, that's another one for you. I hope it helps you. If you have any questions on this stuff, you know how to reach me. Take care.